So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight 2021 as we start off Saarang Vintage Vogue. A big shout out to Saarang 2021 logistics sponsor DHL, and thank you to everyone for making it here. Saarang 2021 brings you free vouchers for exciting goodies. Use the code SARANG10, all in caps, to avail a 10% discount on all products on deltastore.in. Make sure to use the code before the end of March and remember that it can only be used once. Now, without further ado, presenting our first speaker for Saarang 2021, Viswanathan Anand. India's first Grandmaster needs no introduction, as he is often said to be solely responsible for the growing popularity of chess in the country. The unassuming Tiger of Madras is a whopping 5-time world champion, making his story one among the legends. Arguably one of the greatest chess players of all time, it was no surprise that the recipient of the inaugural Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award also went on to become the first ever sportsperson to receive the Padma Vibhushan. Welcome, sir. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, we all uncharacteristically know you as the humble world champion. But our audience would love to know the man behind the legend. So, we have a few questions for you.
All right.
So, this pandemic has been hard for all of us. But playing chess on online platforms against bots as well as other players has always been fairly popular, albeit not as much as in recent times. So how has the pandemic affected you personally vis-a-vis your gameplay?
So you're right. Essentially, chess was already an online sport for quite some time before the pandemic. I think what the pandemic has done to chess is to turn the volume all the way up, so to speak. It was already high, but it's just at max. So first, membership numbers, subscriptions, and games played on the internet were already breaking all records, even before Queen's Gambit, I must note. And then Queen's Gambit happened, and this took it even further. Shops are running out of chess sets, chess clocks, so it's not only online. There are people who actually want to put a chess set on their table at home and play. And I think what it has done is that it has tapped a lot of people who perhaps wanted to play chess at some point, never found the time or never got around to it, and then this year decided to do it because they had so much time, or last year if I want to be correct. So that's really the situation. Now, personally speaking, of course, I had 5 or 6 tournaments planned. In the actual, each one of them got cancelled, and finally I've been at home a lot. I was even stranded in Germany. I mean, stranded suggests you're sort of on a highway waiting for somebody to pick you up. I was in a comfortable place, but nonetheless I couldn't fly back. And finally, I got home on a rescue flight, a Vande Bharat flight. After that, I've been here. Luckily, I've been busy with lots of projects, but chess-wise, I have not been very active this year.
And do you have a preference between online games and real-life ones?
Oh, I'm very much waiting for over-the-board, is the current terminology, over-the-board chess. Online is a bit weird for me, but then again, I have played online before quite a lot. It's just suddenly adapting to it being serious, having an arbiter watching you and actually the result counting has been difficult to adapt to.
And coming to bots, you recently played your own bot online. So how was that experience? I saw you were continuously exasperated by the shoddy technique. So
yes, well, against it was really crazy because once against my bot, I got a winning advantage and then I spoiled it. The second time, I must say, my bot spoiled the winning advantage. So, but it was nice. I mean, it's still a computer, but with human elements, which makes it more of a realistic game. I mean, if you play a strong computer these days, there's no fun at all. But this setup allows you to play a strong opponent while at the same time having some chance, and that's much more fun to play with.
So, do you feel any difference in the tactics used by bots, or do you even have a preference?
Well, just like a computer, it makes moves that look ugly to a human eye, but just like computers, it defends bad positions very well. So it's this kind of borderline between being a phenomenal player and being a great player, and it's just accessible enough for us with a bot. Of course, there are weaker bots as well, and so it's nice. If you want to play and try different styles, it's a nice thing. Whereas when you play a normal computer, it's each version, each software has its own style, but that's it. You cannot adapt it any further. Here, basically, it learns from the games of a certain human being, a certain player, and then it blends that into its own technique. So it makes it interesting, I think.
So, especially when you talk about revolutionary technologies like AlphaZero, so what ramifications do you believe they have had on the fundamental way that chess is played?
I think they've just pushed the envelope. Let's be fair. Before the neural engines, the neural playing programs came along, computers were already 600, 700 points stronger than the best human being.
Yeah.
And they were already at the frontier of interesting chess and showing us things we couldn't possibly recreate. And we were trying, I mean, essentially, we are trying to catch up with them constantly. The latest technology shows all sorts of conclusions, and you try to make sense of all that and see if you can bring it to the table. And this has just taken it one level further, because it turns out that these neural engines are able to beat the old style, let's call them brute force engines, comfortably. Though the brute force ones are fighting back, so they're catching up. In some of they have some of these online 100-game matches between old style and new style engines, and the result is getting mixed. But let's see how it goes.
During the pandemic, we saw grandmasters of the like of Nakamura, who was even coaching amateur chess players, and Carlsen in India, players like Vidit Gujarati, or also comedians like Tanmay Bhatt, with huge followings, get into streaming chess. So, do you think this has had a positive impact on the outreach that chess has?
Definitely. Essentially, what we try to do is to grow the game, promote chess. But as a sport, what chess can do is go to people who are already maybe inclined. You know, like any marketing strategy, you go to the most likely points of success, and you grow it slowly like that. You try to reach people who have perhaps played once in the past. Then you go to someone who thinks, oh, it would be a nice thing to learn chess, and you're trying to reach them. But what has happened this year is essentially, as you say, the comedians got in, and I have no idea if any of their audience was interested in chess before they started to play around with it. And maybe sitting at home, they were unable to come up with comedic material, so they used chess as a kind of a blackboard where they write, and that has been their canvas, if you like. And so it is possible that what they have done is introduce chess to a totally new audience, a totally different audience. Of course, the game will benefit. Anytime a whole new audience comes to the game will benefit. There will be changes, of course, but it can only help the game. So that has been nice. And in the US, if you take away the comedic element, well, there they went to chess is really connected with esports. So before, I didn't really think of chess as an esport, because I thought of esports as something that actually happens on your computer, whereas chess is still played on a thing. But it's smoothly moved into the world of esports, and then all these gaming streamers started to hang out with the chess streamers, and very interesting dynamics everywhere. And then chess.com started to have tournaments exclusively for these streamers, and other social media celebrities and things like that. And look, I couldn't have predicted any one of these trends last year. So it's just fascinating. But the whole time you have the sense that chess has only benefited from it. So
Yeah.
do I understand everything that's happening? No, but it's fantastic.
It's dynamic and evolving constantly. So, have you ever thought of getting into streaming yourself?
Well, I was doing a lot of lessons on Unacademy, and then I've been doing some graphy shows. That's the graphic platform on chess. So I did 2 months of teaching my wife how to play chess, and then besides that, I've done my. I had this idea to at some point work with India's younger players, and then I got this approach 2 years back with Westbridge Capital, who asked if we could work together, and I suggested this to them, and so we have started the Westbridge Foundation to support our youngsters, and so I've got several projects like this going, and I'm open to it, but I haven't been a huge streamer myself.
So, you mentioned the Westbridge Anand Chess Academy. So, you, as I understand, you have a fellowship program to groom 5 young prodigies every single year.
Mm-hmm.
So, how has that journey been so far?
It's only 1 month so far, but essentially the idea was to take the youngsters I thought had the most promise, whom we could work with in the next few years, and make sure that when they become 20 or some such age, they're already near the top 10 or in the top 10, and we have a presence there. So the big challenge for India is how do you convert really the world's best junior situation by some yardstick into, how do you convert that? How do you make a lot of them top 10 players and so on? So the idea was then to support them. So thanks to Westbridge, I was able to organize some trainers. So far, it's all been online. But in the future, depending on the situation, we may also meet offline and have more face-to-face interactions as well. There are a lot of things you want to say which you can't say online always. But so far, it's going great, and I am very enthusiastic about it.
But the future in the Indian chess scene does look quite bright. You have young grandmasters like Vidit, Pentala, Abhidan, and even younger grandmasters such as Nihal and Pragnananda. So, do you believe that another Indian world champion is soon in the making, or do we need more structural base level changes to promote chess?
I would say both. We have the ingredients, if you like, but there are a lot of stages involved, and you have to develop some kind of program and see how to push it forward. It's not to say that they could not make it on their own. Maybe one of them will. But if we organize a kind of program and go like that, then it may happen faster. And also we may have more of them at the top. So it would be fantastic if India could have a lot of youngsters now, potentially where Firouzja is, for instance.
So, as I understand, when you were a young kid in Manila, there was a chess-based game show that you watched, which arguably played a major role in encouraging you to play chess even more seriously. Now, this was a popular show in the Philippines decades ago, but has not been reproduced in India yet. Why do you think that is the case?
Things happen. There were TV shows in Iceland, but the Philippines at that moment was special. That there was actually a lot of interest in chess at that point, and Eugene Torre had become Asia's first grandmaster a few years before that. They had just had the World Championship in Baguio City, and perhaps the climate was just right for that show. Of course, it was very nice for me that I happened to be there at that point when in a country where they even have a show about chess, and I could. But my interest was already quite big. I was already a fairly serious chess player at that point, and it obviously hooked me.
So
a lot of these initiatives, they're just building blocks. The Philippines had that. The UK used to have televised chess games. Germany used to have televised chess games. This is not a tournament that they televised. They would actually have a game in their studio and try to develop concepts and formats. So a lot of experiments happen. You never know which one, like butterflies flapping their wings. You never know when it snowballs, but
What kicks
really
off?
at some point they've had a magical effect.
So, how can we incentivize chess to bring it into a more mainstream audience in India?
Um, you keep working. I mean, you consistently try to make your sport more exciting and more accessible, and take it wider and wider. Um, in a way, that problem has we found some interesting solutions the last year. But we also have to remember that when the pandemic ends, habits will change. So how do we also change quickly for that?
So, when you entered the international scene, you were one of the few Indian players. So, how was that when you were facing players from other countries where they largely dominated the game? So, what was it like for you at that point, being the only Indian in the major leagues?
I barely noticed it, to be honest. No, I'll explain why. Because you would have groups tended to separate out by language. So you would have the Russian speakers, which is a lot of people from Eastern European
Yeah,
countries, and then the Russians. Um, and then you would have maybe a Spanish-speaking group because they're big enough, and then you would have of course, the English, which is everybody else.
yeah.
And you could see very quickly, even in my junior tournaments, very quickly there'd be the English-speaking tables and the Russian tables, and people would separate. I made some close friendships. I grew, of course, as time went by, Indians started to join me, but most of
Yeah.
my career I've been alone. Maybe it was only when Hari Krishna started to come regularly that I had someone there, and he's quite a bit younger, so. Of course, we were friendly quite often, but
I believe you picked up quite a few languages.
there's also the other thing, which is it was the Russians were quite a big group, and so you automatically sort of get into the other group.
Now, when it comes to formats, many chess players dislike blitz since they feel that the quality of the game is compromised. But on the other hand, other people also like the added challenge that it brings. So, having been the world number one in various formats, do you have a preference?
I generally go with whichever format I'm doing well in at the moment, but I would say that it's still a generational thing. I mean, a generation which grew up with blitz being only for fun, it's only for casual things,
Yeah.
and classical chess was. Then it's hardwired into you to treat things that way, and when blitz has big prizes and it actually has world championships and blitz has its own thing, then you start to think. But in a way, you've been tricked because you were brought up with this idea that it was something frivolous. But the younger players don't think that at all. Even the ones who are not good at it don't resent blitz. They think it's a legitimate form of the game. And
Okay.
you can take the comparisons with the tiebreak in tennis or the various formats in cricket. It's the same thing. And everybody might have their preference, but I don't think anybody questions why blitz exists.
So, talking about the blitz and rapid formats of the game, I believe at the World Championship in Saudi Arabia, you were initially hoping for a top 10 finish at best, but ended up becoming the world champion. So, what's the story behind that?
Well, that is the story. I'd come off one very bad result, and I was slightly gloomy. But at the same time, I from '92 to at least about 2008, I was considered the world's best rapid and blitz player, simply the world's fastest player. But by 2014-15, I started to find it heavy going, and by the time I got to Riyadh, I had no particular reason to think I was amongst the favorites, and I had no particular expectations, and I had this bad result in another format, but somehow my mood was off, and I went there very pessimistically. But quite often I must say that when I go to a tournament pessimistically, it turns out incredibly well, both in the candidates in 2014 and in Riyadh. The same thing happened to me, that I go there just hoping to survive, and things go gangbusters. But unfortunately, you can't fake pessimism. So if I tell myself now I'm going to be pessimistic, that doesn't work. I guess it has to be natural.
So was there something that you changed in your strategy or game, or some basic strategy which you changed which turned the tides around in your favor?
Not really. At best, I think if anything, I prepared less. So because I was so disgusted with chess after this result in London that London finished on December 11th. I got home on the 14th, and on the 24th, I flew out to Riyadh. So I had about 10 days at home, and I was in no mood to work or do anything. So I played a few practice games, and that was it. And I flew out to Riyadh, and I literally had this feeling of someone being dropped into a swimming pool, and then you figure out how to swim, sort of thing. Every day the rounds would start. I just went there, tried to survive each game. And it sounds flippant, but in a way, your focus on an individual moment is very high, and you stop thinking about who is leading the tournament, what is that guy doing, can I catch up with him? You stop thinking of a lot of nonsense, and you literally just play the move in front of you, the game in front of you, and it's a very cleansing attitude to have. I wish I could have faked it more often, but it's a very cleansing attitude to have. And then suddenly you wind up with the most points. What can I say?
So, moreover, this was at a later stage in your career when most people had written off the tournament. So, considering the decrease in the average age of the top 10 in the world, do you think experience still holds the same importance that it did in chess a few decades ago?
No, it doesn't. When I was growing up, I would say that the players like Korchnoi, Potish and all, the time it took me to understand certain things that they took for granted was in the years, at least months. Because you had to play it a few times, you had to experience it. You had to spend enough time thinking about that problem before the answers started to appear to you, and they had already got this built in. So experience compensated for the youth, and that has been a kind of balance in chess. But recently, I would say since computers came along, it's been accelerating.
Okay.
That almost anything you want to understand, if you analyze with the computer long enough, the answers come so quickly and so effortlessly, you find a way of catching up. So any advantage that experience gives you is limited, but the calculation gap still exists. And when I was in my teens, the average age of the top 10 was 36. At least it was for 1984. I remember that because I looked up some old books and I checked it. And then I checked it for maybe 2000, I don't remember, 10 or 11. And it had dropped to 22.
Oh.
And there were two of us. There was Topalov and myself. Sorry, so 2014 it was. Topalov and myself were in the top 10 at that point. And we were both in our 40s. So I was pulling it up to 22 because otherwise it would be even 20. So that's the trend in chess. It's becoming a much younger sport.
Yeah, I think just last week, a young 18-year-old Andrei Esipenko beat Magnus Carlsen in a game of classical chess. So this has happened quite a few times before as well. So is beating the world champion akin to being the next one, or should only the FIDE ratings be taken into account?
It doesn't hurt, but you only become world champion by winning the world championship cycle.
Yeah.
Even ratings doesn't help.
Yeah.
You can have the highest rating, but you actually have to win the world title because that is what the world title is. It is a specific competition. Yeah. But of course, beating the world champion gives you a lot of confidence. It signals your ability. It's a good thing, but it has nothing to do with the world title itself.
So you often mention that your mother and your wife Aruna ma'am, they've been brilliant support systems for you. So how important have they been in your personal as well as professional life? So how instrumental were they in making Viswanathan Anand?
I think with parents, of course, their influence is huge because you can go through your entire life and keep on thinking, what I just did is very similar to what my mother would have done or my father would have done. You learn these things
Yeah.
almost by habit. And my mother traveled with me when I was very young and impressionable, and probably that's why she was traveling with me to make sure that I didn't fall into bad habits and things like that. On top of that, to be there for me if I needed some help, and it's a luxury when you're young that you can depend so much on your mother. And I can add to that, I was lucky that my mother knew how to play chess
Yeah.
because in the 70s, um, you couldn't just log in and find out what are the rules of chess and learn how to play.
Yeah.
Somebody had to be there to teach you, and you had to be lucky that someone in your
She was a guiding force
family
for
or in your circle knew how to play chess, and then that they were willing to teach you and so on. So for me, that was lucky. And uh, in those days, almost every strong player learned it from a family member because that was the most natural way to learn. So it can be grandfather, father, mother, whatever. Mother is quite rare, so that thing. But you can say in many ways it's because of my mother I was even playing chess. I think Aruna stabilized a lot of things in me because for a few years I was traveling alone already, and she brings a lot of what you would call process. I'm a typical chess player. My mind is in the clouds, and I'm more focused on
Yeah.
what people play. And Aruna helped with progressively taking over every other aspect so that I could focus exclusively on chess. That's helpful. And also this special role that a wife can play, that she can also be a psychologist because she sees you all the time and she knows you don't have to explain a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so she took a lot of the emotional noise and the struggles and so on. And it's difficult to quantify these things, but I would say it's invaluable. And that's again, I was very lucky that all my life I've had this kind of support.
So even you recently mentioned that you were teaching Aruna ma'am chess. So how was that experience?
It was nice. The thing is, Aruna by now knows a hell of a lot about chess without even ever having tried to find out because she's been at so many tournaments and traveled
Yeah.
and met players but at the same time she's never made any systematic attempt to learn chess or so she knows a lot about chess, but we had to structure it a little bit, and I tried to explain. Well, this is how you play this opening. If you want to play this opening, you need to know these few details. And do you actually know how to mate with a king and rook? Yeah, approximately yes, but approximately is not enough. So things like that. So we tried to lock down things, and it was more about setting an example. We thought that if someone at home is trying to teach their spouse or their family member chess, then that maybe we could give them a roadmap.
And how about your son Akhil? Is he interested in chess?
Yes, he plays chess. He recently won a tournament with some of his
Oh, nice.
playing companions, and yeah, he likes chess, but he also likes many other things. So. Coding is very good in art. And so on.
Oh, nice. So your biopic is also in the works. How does that feel? Do you feel that it would do justice to your life?
Well, I will work with them. So, I certainly hope it turns out well, but we will face this typical problem. What is it we want
Yeah.
to highlight? Because every medium has its own rules. A chess book is one thing. A biography, like I wrote last year, is a different
Yeah.
thing. It's important you decide what goes in, what goes out. And again, a screen is a different medium, and so what goes in, what goes out. What episode of your life will you linger and really dwell on? What does it represent about all the other things? So there'll be huge learning curve for me as well, just like the book was. The book also was a learning curve because you just say something, and then they, like Susan would sit and say, "Okay, can you explain that further? Can you explain that further? Can you explain that?" And then you realize, oh, these things are obvious to me, but how do you make them obvious to the reader? And a movie will be that whole thing again in a new format. But I'm very excited. I'm
So
looking
you
forward.
mentioned that you have to choose which episodes from your life you want to see on the silver screen. So are there any specific moments which you would want to be there in the movie?
Yes, there are definitely things that you want to see. I mean, my biography I found to be quite liberating because it was a chance to finally set the record straight in many areas and talk. Because people have, you can't blame them if people only read newspapers and they only see you from a distance. They have this image of a chess player based on the photos that they see and so on. But there's so much more to it, and the question is, how do you convey all that? And the same thing will happen here. It's not a question of leaving something out, I think, but how do you catch an incident that represents a lot of other incidents and where the audience gets a better sense of who you are? So that'll be the
So coming to the audience, I feel they have a lot of questions for you.
okay.
So we'll be taking some of those now.
Sure.
First one is, tell us about your road trip across Europe during the Iceland volcanic eruption.
Well, so on April 14th, we were supposed to take a flight from Madrid to Frankfurt. And all my seconds, the whole team was going to assemble in Frankfurt. So Surya flew in on 14th morning from India. Another friend was in Germany, so he just drove across. Two of my trainers, one from Denmark and one from Poland, they were going to fly in. Then on the 15th, we were going to fly out to Sofia. With both the Danish and the Polish player, we got into trouble right away because flight after flight got cancelled. So he first tried this smaller airport near where he lived. Then he tried Copenhagen Airport. Then he tried Hamburg Airport, dashing across by train. And eventually realized the volcano shutting down airports faster than the train can do. So one by one, all these options got foreclosed. Anyway, the fact that these countries are right next door was fine. We could actually assemble in Frankfurt. And just to show you how chaotic there was no information. Nobody seemed to know anything because even air traffic control was taking decisions for the first time. So there was nobody to consult. Then suddenly somebody told us, look, run to the airport and get your luggage out before they close everything. Because once they close it, you'll get into this bureaucratic wall. Oh, we don't know. We're waiting for this agency to decide, that agency to decide. So we rushed to the airport because we had checked in our luggage through, as you can imagine. We rushed to the airport, said, no, we are not going on tomorrow's flight. Took the luggage out and came running back. And then next day we realized how lucky we were because the whole airport was sealed off. And like this, it was very impromptu and chaotic. Then we spent 3 days waiting for airports to reopen. And we realized that we would have to make a decision quickly because we could still hope that the airports would reopen even on the 21st. But if they didn't, what would happen? So we took a bus on a van on the 18th. We drove across. Again, initially the plan was to work on the van. So we pulled up our computers, a magnetic chess set. We were trying to get some work done. And then we understood that it's like pretending to study for an exam. If your heart is not in it, you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and we had already felt this in Frankfurt. Whenever we tried to get any work done, nothing was happening because everybody's thoughts were, when will the flights be available and so on. So, best decision we did was, okay, forget all this. Let's just watch a movie. And then they happened to have Dr. House, a whole season of that. So we watched that. And then they had Lord of the Rings, extended version. So we put that in and we started watching. So we went Frankfurt, Germany to Austria, then on to Hungary, where we spent the night. Next morning, we drove from Hungary to Romania, drove through Romania the whole day. And at 3 a.m, we crossed the river on a barge to Bulgaria. And we then drove to Sofia. And the funny thing is, 1 hour before we reached Sofia, we knew if airspace reopened, we had made the wrong decision. But luckily, it didn't reopen for another 3 days. So it was the right one. And look, all our plans had been messed up. Everything we had hoped to do for 5 days was messed up. But sometimes, at least the good thing is, you can't blame yourself. So and the funny thing is, when we reached the hotel, we had 10 minutes left of the movie. The actual final scene, Mount Doom. So we asked the van guy if he could go around the hotel a couple of times so that we could finish the movie.
And they say chess players have a boring life.
Yes.
So, okay, here's an interesting one. During an intense game, how do you keep your emotions in check if you've made a blunder and make sure not to give away your pieces?
It's sometimes you will already have given it away. Sometimes you manage to hide a few symptoms, but an experienced player will know. The fact that you suddenly go quiet is also a sign. Unfortunately, not only is this a sign, but suddenly holding your breath and sitting still, and the other person, normally you're fidgeting and moving, but suddenly you go still and the other person thinks what's happened, and then he realizes, wait, something must have happened. So it's very hard to not give away anything, but you keep, if your face is normally not expressive, then that's healthy, because then you're not arousing any suspicion, and sometimes hopefully you get away with it.
So, which is your favorite personal game and why?
My personal favorite would be my win against Lothier in Biel in '97, so that's in Switzerland. And my second favorite would be my win against Aronian, but in 2013. But it's literally like asking me which hand I prefer. Both games mean a lot.
So there's a query from a chess player that playing classical chess all her life, she feels it's very difficult to cope up with the present scenario where most tournaments focus on blitz. So how do you go about that?
I agree. I agree with her. I like classical chess too, but blitz, if you go in with the right attitude, it's fun as well. I mean, you should go into blitz not caring and really not caring about the moves. You should just assume, look, there's going to be a lot of horrible moves made, a lot of blunders. The result is going to make no sense, and that's fine. And if you play with that slightly liberated attitude, it happens. Like last year in Romania and in Paris, I had extremely good blitz events. After a bad first day, and the same thing happened in Kolkata 3 years back. Bad rapid tournament, decent first blitz day, and the final day I scored all my points. So. But it's in your head. I mean, I assume what she means is that the moves stop making sense and you don't really get a chance to think things through. But if you go with the right attitude.
So, how did you feel seeing 70,000 people watching the Olympiad final? Did you ever imagine this much support for Indian chess? As seeing when you started, there was almost no traction at all in mainstream media.
I wouldn't agree with that. I have often found from my early World Championship matches that there's a lot of traction. And so certainly this was nothing new for me. It's not like the internet was invented yesterday. It goes back a while, and people found out different ways before they would. The newspaper started carrying regular items on chess for quite some time, and chess has been on a lot of websites and things like that. There's been online coverage for a while and so on. But on top of that, I had no sense of being watched by anyone, because how do you? They're somewhere online. I think. I mean, if you had told me no, there are only 3 people watching, I would have believed that as well. I had no interaction with them, no sense at all that this was happening. But like I said, it's very good for the game that this new thing. But it wasn't a new phenomenon.
So youngsters now have many career choices, and it's usually advised to go for the safer choices. So how do you decide whether you're good enough to take that extra leap of faith and take the risk?
I will repeat a story. Probably people have heard it, but long back when I had just become a grandmaster, I was going in a train in India, and the person sitting next to me said, young man, nice elderly gentleman. He said, young man, what do you do? And I said, no, I'm a chess player. You're half baiting him. He's going to be surprised and you want to see how the fun goes. But I didn't expect his response. He said, okay, but what do you do? I'm a chess player. So he said, but you have some other plans. And I said, no, probably I'm hoping to play chess for a living. And then he said, young man, as a sportsman in India, it's very unpredictable, and be very careful about this decision. Something to that effect. I mean, if you were Viswanathan Anand, you could make a living, but it seems very risky for you, something like that. I thought, fair enough. I think that's as good as you can hope. But nowadays, my answer is much easier. I just tell people, well, you tell me what's a secure job. You tell me in which industry you've got a job for life, and go for it. So now the answer is so easy.
What was your reaction when he mentioned the Viswanathan Anand lane?
I enjoyed it, but of course I couldn't bring myself to tell him anything.
Okay. Have you ever been into the lesser played variants of the game, such as lightning chess and hexagonal chess?
Well, lightning chess is blitz chess, so that's the thing. And I've played every kind of time control. I have long back, even maybe 30 years back, I played this 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional. I mean,
Big Bang Theory,
this kind of thing, and so on. Also, 3-way chess, 4-way chess, this kind of stuff. And I have played losing chess, bug house. In fact, once when I was very young, I played in a junior tournament in Karnataka, and everybody was sitting and playing losing chess. And then when I went to the board, I was almost terrorized because I realized my hand was trying to make losing moves and dropping pieces, and I can't recover from that. So after that, I told myself I'll never play losing chess again while during a tournament, so that because it really gets into your head.
Yeah.
I've played variants, but not that much. And recently, what's become popular in top tournaments is, I don't even know the name, but you play on one board, your partner plays on another board. Every piece he captures, he gives to you, and every piece you capture, you give to him. And 2 teams each. But I found it just very difficult to get used to.
Yeah, that's very convoluted. So, okay, apart from chess, do you play or enjoy watching any other sport?
When I was in Spain, I started to watch football a lot. And of course, typically when I'm traveling and playing tournaments, there's a lot in the tennis circuit. So that's another thing I watch a lot. And besides that, I watch any interesting sport that happens to be online, or anything that an Indian is driving Zumbas. So, a bit of badminton, bit of Olympics, this, that. Golf, but the sports I follow the most, I would say football and tennis.
Okay. So, along similar lines, we have Magnus Carlsen is responsible for the chess revolution in Norway. Just one man drove the whole country towards a game. So, is it possible in a country like India, where cricket has been running through our blood for years?
I don't know. Norway is also a very small country, so it's hard to compare. But no, it's great what he's done.
Any books that you would recommend to beginners for chess, apart from your own, of course?
Yes. These days, the most interesting books, I think, are game collections. You can take a famous player's best games or something like that and see. Because almost all opening books tend to be out of date pretty soon. I think the best books you can buy are the ones that a little bit timeless. So,
okay,
something you can look at tomorrow and the game still makes sense.
Okay, we'll just take a few more questions. Coming to the movie Pawn Sacrifice, do grandmasters usually experience similar thoughts and experiences?
Pawn Sacrifice was decent, and again, this is what I meant when I was talking about a movie being a different format. That whenever you're trying to make a movie about the great Soviet dominance, so anything with Bobby Fischer and that era of Soviet dominance, you need to have a KGB guy walking around. And because the KGB guy has to walk around, he has to look mean and tough. And then the player, and a lot of these stereotypes are put in there. The players recognize them to be false. But at the same time, the background is true, though they over-represent it to highlight it. So you can see that in this case, they're trying to take chess and explain to a non-chess audience. And that's the classic collision. I I still like the movie a lot because it was accurate, even if they took some liberty in how they presented stuff. A lot of it is accurate, but of course, Queen's Gambit is much more accurate. Like Pawn Sacrifice, some of the games and some of the players they didn't make sense, and we immediately know they've substituted I don't know a Bulgarian or a Hungarian for a Russian. You could immediately make out certain flaws, but in Queen's Gambit, um, it was generally as close to what a chess tournament you would expect to be.
So how important do you feel mainstream TV shows and movies are to increase the outreach that the game has?
They're very important because again and again the challenge is how do you reach new audiences, and this is the classic method. And you get buzz about it. It gets into the newspapers, and people. A surprising number of people will say, I saw this and I was inspired to try it. So that's the reason it's important.
Okay, so coming to a last question, what do you feel that your nice person image has, like, what role has it played vis-a-vis your professional growth?
Well, if you had read my book, you would know that it was just an image. Basically, I was brought up in a certain way to behave in a certain way, and I think this is very strong. Also, not only are you expected to behave in a certain way, but you feel uncomfortable behaving in any other way.
Yeah.
And as my career went on, I realized that it was best to behave in the way that made me feel comfortable, because otherwise too much of mental bandwidth was going into how do people perceive me, how am I coming across, is this the right thing, so maybe it became very extreme, but in the end it's a facade. I mean, there are moments I want to kick someone, the moments I want to kick myself. You can't help these things, but you have to maintain a certain image out there, mumble what you can, and then get home, and then you can let loose.
Thank you. So this was a really fun session. It was absolutely delightful to have you with us today. Just any advice that you would have for the chess enthusiasts from IIT Madras or outside?
Just practice a lot. If you want to get better, just practice a lot, and you will have fun.
Okay. And finally, a big shout out to our Saarang 2021 logistics sponsor, DHL. Thank you for joining us today. At 6 p.m., we have another lecture by right here on AirMeet. So do stay tuned for this. Thank you.
Thank you.